over here for grade. You remember the kind of templates?
No, I'm definitely sure there's some chairs. There's one over there that I was on. Could be. There's a chair back there.
It's an interesting, I mean, it's just
I'm going to go back. See you later, Will. Yeah, thank you.
but it's also to have a work that's in public space. It's really part of my work. So it's sort of the typographical aspect is the thing that I took on but was never really
It's like we need inspiration.
so it's
Sorry, I'll settle down. Are you making all the decisions?
Yeah, I control it.
Dialogue 29. Yeah. It's been going for about 2 years. So, welcome to Caroline Voet. This evening, Caroline introduces her book, A House to Live With, 16 Variations of Dom Hans van der Laan and his Companions, published by Clark Books. Caroline is an architect and an associate professor at the Faculty of Architecture at Halebrown and founder of Voet Architecture plus Objects. Her research focuses on creative reuse, dissecting buildings, architectural drawings, and design process. Her book, Dom Hans van der Laan, A House of Mind, received the DAM Architectural Book of the Year 2018. She was co-editor of the book, Autonomous Architecture in Flanders 2016, and of the hybrid practitioner, Building, Teaching, Research and Architecture 2022. Her architectural practice crosses the boundaries between small architectures and conversions, scenography, curatorship, and cultural projects. So tonight, A House to Live With is the culmination of Caroline's research into a series of houses built by the Dutch Benedictine monk and architect Dom Hans van der Laan. This is the first monograph on these projects, designed by van der Laan and some of his students from the ecclesiastical architecture course he taught at between 1946 and 1973. 16 houses created between 66 and 85, presented in detail in their compositional and design principles analysed. The focus is on the mathematical relationship between numbers and volumes and on the influence of ancient Roman architecture. Also examined are the interplay between house and garden, house and courtyard, and the position of the large table in the house. The book is available to purchase tonight at a discounted rate. So, Caroline, most welcome. Thank you. And a spare chair.
Thank you so much, Simon, for introducing me. You can all hear me. I've known Simon for quite some time now. Basically, when you were writing, you just came out with your Brutalist's book. That was your Brutalist phase, I guess, a while ago, and you've been publishing also. Liber Practitioner has been launched here. So I'm very, very happy to be here today. Especially because this is officially the start of my sabbatical year, which means, of course, my practice is going on, kind of meandering everywhere a little bit, but no more for a year students at my sleeve, or being a program director at the bachelor's at KU Leuven, or any meetings like that. So it's officially the first day we're here, 1st of October, with you. So I'm very happy to share that. I was this afternoon already at Drawing Matter, looking at some Caesar sketchbook that hopefully at some point I will write about. And the journey goes through the Venice Biennale, where I've been invited to do a workshop, Barcelona, China, Coimbra, roam, let's see where it brings me. I don't have a very clear plan, and I really, really love that. So I will not be doing this the coming of year. This is actually my kind of study platform or research platform at KU Leuven, structural contingencies, which has been going on for a couple of years now. So with students, we tend to analyze buildings, one building for a really long time, to draw it and redraw, until you kind of come loose from authorship and end up with certain tools and insights through drawing that you can then tackle these impossible, often buildings from the 80s and the 90s and look at transformational processes. That's what we do. So here with me in the back as well is Maria. She's one of our students that, for example, did the Ball House a couple of years ago and was here in London, I guess 4 years ago, Maria? Yeah. And she's working now in my office, so a lot of the students tend to stick with me here and there, which I absolutely love. I'll give you a very small journey about where I come from and where this interest in Thomas van der Laan actually grew from. And I've been studying in Antwerp, which was still very much dominated then. We could choose between Mies and Le Corbusier and, you know, some Rem colas, you know, you could fit it in as well. But I really loved the work of Hiromi Fuji, which then was really about scale of building, human scale, and of course geometries. Graduating in Antwerp, I moved on to the AA, where I did the AA DRL, and we were kind of brainwashed into landscape architecture and blocks and these kind of things, and I wasn't very comfortable with that, so I needed something to hold on, and what helped me was patterns, again proportion, rhythm, to bring in that human scale. And this is, I think, more than 25 years ago. I ended up here in 1997. I found this work of Josiah McElhenney, which really helped me to do my end project at the AA, which then, of course, it's about folded surfaces, but still there's a lot of geometry in the back. So this is kind of my back story, where I came from. I started teaching at the AA immediately, very creative, doing lots of workshops, and I ended up in the office of Zaha Hadid, where I mostly focused. This was mostly, she wasn't really building yet, which I really liked. So a lot of her smaller projects. I worked a bit on the Rome Maxi as well. So these things, they kind of feed into my own work. Hi there. Which feeds into my own work, which is still hoovering along with the small scale, human touch, how light travels. So I'm still working within architectures, but mostly architectures of really good friends and designers that I can help with the interiors or scenography or some installations or lighting elements, things like that. So that kind of stick to me. Whenever you deal with some kind of a content, I like to look at the way that people used to be in space, such objects, how the light was there, how they were dressed, and that really feeds into my own work. And installation, for example, in the Singel, which was my first project, 2004, in a very hard architectural extension by Stefan Deel, I kind of humanized things a little bit, but still there was everything coming from the detail, the materiality, the way light travels through that. And always, this is a small art cabinet in Stan Streubel's house. How people look at things, how people touch things, and how the light travels. But through this hapticity, always there's these patterns again that feed into my work and how you kind of control these things. Smaller installations like this, for example, that is being reused now in a library for parents with their babies to read inside. It's a small reading room now. And I noticed, of course, that patterns with Zaha, I was very happy doing that there. Parametrics was not really my thing, so I kind of left before she really started building. I ended up in the office of Christian Kiekens, who was very much into Baroque geometries, these Borromini drawings, and I noticed also in my own work that kind of seeps in. So I hope during this sabbatical to kind of revisit that, now that I'm 20, 25, 30 years further down the road. How do I deal with these things? What do I do with these things? As I noticed that I really want things to have a certain kind of order, to give rhythm, that has to do with human scale of touching, but also always in dialogue with the space that transforms and changes, and how spaces are never dealing with objects, but always dealing with space that is then into some kind of a dialogue. So now I'm very happy to, for example, do some projects. This is in the Begrinage in Hasselt that just opened by David Keun actually, and Bovenbouw. It's right next to Francesca Torso's building. So I'm very happy to do some furniture pieces in there, which give a story for people to visit it. So these ordering elements, of course, while at Christian Kiekens, this is 2002, 3, 4, I got to know the work of Thomas van der Laan. I did a PhD on his work, worked on that for 7 years. That was finished about 2013. And the PhD really was a lot about, by the way, there was somebody asking already for archival drawings of van der Laan. A lot of them are digitalized, and in this website you can find several of them. So it's in Dutch, but there's also an English version. Just look at the archive button. You can see some of his, study some of his original drawings. So this is an educational website that's been put up about a couple of years ago. That's been traveling, I know, educational institutions now. So what I was absolutely interested in was how these 4 convents and this one house that I kind of got to know, why are they the way they are? You know, where does this come from? And I got to see Vals first, which is actually the monastery he did, actually the first one, the extension in this typical, very austere building style. And of course I was completely smitten by how every building element has got its own autonomy, but is always in an instant dialogue with a certain nearness of what happens behind. If you look at the stair, for example, in the atrium in Vals, which was built 1968, how actually going up is first introduced by a small horizontal element just to put your hand on, and suddenly this very monumental concrete stair says hello. And of course how smaller elements like this kind of touch in each other, never in the middle but always slightly off. I really liked these things, and I wanted to understand where they came from and how he thought about these ideas. And of course there's this beautiful book, Architectonic Space, which talks about all these architectonic terminology, line, plane and volume, or ground ratio, dispositions of different elements. And I really loved it. It's a very philosophical book. So what I wanted to do was try to find the connection between the two. And that was what my PhD was about. Before this one came out, 2 books I've written. The first one is the Tomelilla book. It's on his Swedish convent. I was very lucky that he kind of conceptualized this building in a close dialogue with one of his cousins, Rick van der Laan. So there's an extensive communication by written letters and drawings and sketches from the first sketch that he made just 2 minutes after he met the abbess of Tomelilla in Sweden until the last construction drawings. So I could lay them all out and could show where the changes went and how he made decisions. So yeah, it's a really detailed book like that. The second book I made was A House for the Mind, which is open source online. You can download it for free, which was accompanied by an exhibition in Antwerp in the Singel as well. It's mostly about Klozenberg Abbey. I'll give you now like 3 clues that I think are also within this new book. 3 very essential elements which I love so much, talk about it with my students, and also share this through my own work. And the first one is Van der Laan's concept of nearness. So before we dive into this kind of a hardcore proportion, I'm not going to do that too much for you. I could talk for hours, I'm not going to do that. There's these other two elements, and the first one is nearness. It's nabijheid. And basically it's about this idea that space is in a dialogue. It has this kind of a phenomenological background. Johanni Palasma writes about it as well. So that actually architecture is there to project human measures and a sense of order into the measureless and meaningless natural space. I think as an architect you tend to go with that. I'm sure there's lots of architects, maybe not in the audience now, who might not want to sit here now, who don't really want to go with that. But I really believe in that. This gentle way of designing. And so the first thing he does is, and this is Van der Laan talking about nearness and really going into phenomenology. This is actually concepts from Bolno, Friedrich Bolno, that actually says that every human being has got an aura around oneself, and it's about your own body length projected outward. So for Van der Laan, this is where architecture starts to communicate, and the smallest scale of space is always dealing with that. So we tend to see in Van der Laan's abbeys, there's always about something up between 3.5 and 4 meters going on, and that's the first module that we see. This is much larger than, for example, a Corbusier's modular, which is 226, and sometimes very narrow and low. Van der Laan has got some more grandeur, but I think they both work. But Van der Laan believed that this is what nearness is about. And I tend to explain it like this, for example. Simon, you're sitting pretty far right now, really within my personal space. But if I would move over here, I think at some point you would notice like, oh, yeah, hi, I'm okay, yep. So it's something that, yeah, I think as an architect, to be aware of that, about when are you really addressing somebody, when are you dealing with the personal space, when are you moving outside, where's this boundary, and what can space do with that, and be aware of that as a designer. So what Van der Laan did, he literally translated that first idea of immediate nearness into architectonic space. And he built a cella out of that, and that's like the building stone of all of his houses and all of his abbeys. And for him, he wanted us to feel that scale, and in order for us to feel that, there's a thickness of the wall. It's not the surface of the wall, it's the thickness of the wall. That is there like, almost like clothing. And for him, that's a balance that he said it's 1:7. So walls often are 1/2 meter thick, which of course in the 60s and the 70s were very hard to build because walls tend to be much narrower, but I think we're going in that direction anyway again. But so there's always this idea, if the walls get thinner, he says, you don't feel that space, so it's proportional always, the 1:7. If walls get thicker, it's oppressive, you know, it's like, so this was his way of saying 1:7, that's my rule. So he called it the nearness, the mass to space relationship 1:7. And we see that in his abbeys. Upstairs there's the cells, the sleeping cells. They're all about this 3.5 by 4 meters, and then they're, you know, repeated. You see that, of course, in Rosenberg Abbey, for example, on the first floor, and all the spaces downstairs, they're kind of lined up and following this module. But the most essential thing is that actually Van der Laan is never building like that, unless when it's a closed sleeping cellar. When he's going outside of these rigid cellas, which are juxtapositions, and you tend to look at or discover the other spaces in his abbey, you notice that these cellas, they're not made, they arise. So you very gently always have a few architectural elements, like a canopy or a small rising of the floor. You've got 2 walls coming down, you've got 1 column at the back. So it's because of the positioning of other elements that this first nearness element comes in. And so this is the entrance area, that's actually the drawing that Maria made. Entrance area of Rosenberg Abbey. which introduces this human scale, this about 3.5 meters, not by really making it, but just by introducing it through these specific elements. When he makes bigger spaces, he talks about a space that's 7 times bigger. Spaces like the one that we're in now could be maybe part of the walking distance. And then the scale of the building sitting on its side, and he relates it to the eyesight. So he translates this literally into this. The cella grows into a chord, grows into a domain. And when he starts making architecture with that, he says, let's not do these kind of central dispositions like the one you see on the left top, yeah? Where one is in the middle of the other. He says one is kind of destroying the other. This is object-based architecture. Let's move them to the side and start always from peripheral dispositions. So you see the cells moving to the side, you see the chords moving to the side. So it's this kind of juxtaposition where one is making the other, and then space arises. And there's much more space to be. So this is a model that he made in the 80s, his first exhibition to prove his point. Central disposition of 144 cells, but also this is a disposition of 144 cells, but in a peripheral combination. So yeah, you don't have to, you can count it if you want. So it's actually the same, and unfortunately, I guess in the UK, well, in Belgium, this is how we have to build because of the regulations. Smaller houses and need to have, yeah, well, unfortunately. So we try to say tell our students, oh, there's something, there's a message here. Does it work? So is there... I can go through. It's working? Yeah. So, yeah, peripheral disposition. His main building to study that, which is also in the book in the introduction. So what I'm saying now is kind of first 120 pages of the book, just explaining these concepts. He found it really well in the Hagia Sophia. This is one of his students drawing that, where actually within the column and then the side chapels and the main space, one is always copied in the other. To make bigger spaces, we don't go into juxtaposition. He has a cella which he stretches into a gallery, which he stretches then in a bigger room, which of course you recognize actually the prototype of the basilica. So this first idea, you grew from nearness, there's always this architectonic element that you start from in relationship to the space around it. And that's then done, second concept that I really learned from a lot from him is the concept of superposition, which is a very classical tradition, or Vitruvian even. But what he does with that is kind of combines it with pattern thinking of the 60s and the 70s. He was obsessed at some point with tartans, so I wrote a nice text on that, which is on the Drawing Matter website, about how by the time he was obsessed with tartans, he started to design the spaces, and you can see that patterns start to shift in that. So the way that he uses superposition, I learned a lot from that. And basically what he says is that when we're inside of a space, we can't just measure it, we can't read volumes, and we can't read surfaces. We're always breaking down in heights and widths, and we do that kind of intuitively. He says we do it as with time, which is a very precise system on the one hand, but on the other hand also a very intuitive system. If you say to somebody, I will see you in 15 minutes, that's giving a sense of time, doesn't mean exactly. Or you've got the days of the week and the festive days, the seasons, you know. So there's a lot of intuitive rhythm going on, but behind there is a very strict system to make it all work. And he really wanted to find this very strict system for architecture. And he says, reflecting back, this is a beautiful sketch that he made for Richard Padovan, which was his first biographer. They have also an extensive communication between them. And he says that when he was younger, he was looking at this Dom Tower in Utrecht. And he says, how come this really huge tower still makes me connect to it? I kind of feel, yeah, it doesn't impress me, it's not too monumentalized. And he says that actually the real reason why they're doing that is because of these balusters, because they're in a superposition onto this kind of articulated element. So it's a 1 to 4, and actually there's this hole from the hole to the 3 parts in the hood, and then again subdivided to this one. They're there not just as ornamental features, but as a yardstick to help to read the whole thing. So he says that already when he was about 20 years old, not even studying architecture. This was a first clue for him. But it's not until 1957 that he actually starts to build these kinds of architectures in the superposition. We have a whole series of buildings which are also in the book, which are very much ornamentalized, lots of columns, lots in concrete, but big capitals. 1957, I mean, he kind of leaves that behind. Why exactly that date? I'm practically sure it's because of his students, actually, what this book is more about, and the dialogue with them, that he understands that architecture can be about hapticity and about very clear minimal lines, not about the ornament or the baluster in the tower, but more about, especially when you are inside, about rhythms of space. So this new awareness comes. And you see, and this is a drawing that I found, which he drew 1957, where I suddenly noticed is that he started to scratch out columns, and you see that the columns that are actually on the sides of the side chapels, they are not aligned with the columns in the middle. And it's only then that I realized that that was actually the main design feature of that space, and that actually introduced an effect of different hapticities and light conditions, capturing these columns at different moments, and especially when you move through it diagonally, you also enter the space diagonally. All these columns, they start to slide, and they kind of, the space really draws you inside. So we started to make drawings like that, which is almost like a musical score, to understand rhythms of space and even spaces on top of each other, and windows and window elements. And he built 4 abbeys like that, so the Tonnerilla and the Vals, and then there's 2 of them, the Rosenberg and one in the center as well. He built 4 abbeys like that, and that's it, basically. So another thing to then go into is that that's his main quest, and already in the 30s, he really wanted to find these foundational elements of architecture, and for him that was linked to proportion. So he tested the golden section first. He actually entered the Benedictine convent of Oosterhout, which was built by Don Melo, who works a lot actually with golden sections, and he wasn't satisfied by that. So at some point, and apparently the myth says, which of course he has written himself, that there was a monk who put a note in front of his door, and he found this kind of a proportion like that, and he started to play with that. And he called it the plastic number and the plastic number series. It's about 3 to 4, but also a very exact number, 1.3247. And it was very difficult to understand. He could hardly explain it well. But yeah, he made this book of it in the 60s, plastic number, which he sent to a few architects, and one of them was Gerrit Rietveld, who absolutely loved it. And yeah, these guys, they understood. And he writes the laws of our discernment and how it reacts to plane in spatial measures. That's what it's about. So for him, until the highest clearness is achieved, more systems seem possible, but I don't know any that is so complete and scientifically described. But this is a very rare reaction. In the 70s, nobody really understood what this plastic number was about. They wrote about architects that he was teaching, which will come by slowly now. But nobody really understood. So I was very happy to, during my PhD, find this little sketch again that he made for Padova, which just shows how he designed his ever first thing. And that was a small chapel that had been damaged by the war, and he needed to design a 3-dimensional tower on a 2-dimensional facade. And he was then working with this golden section. Didn't really work because he wanted to work hierarchically from the smallest element to the biggest one. And he suddenly decided like, okay, let's try this thing that I found in front of my door, this 3 to 4, and suddenly it all came together for him with this 3 to 4 proportion, and then again a 3 to 4 proportion, and then again a 3 to 4 proportion, until you end up with the smallest element. The buttress is here, which is still in those days ornamental and like the essential communication of the articulation of that whole tower. So for him, this element that goes from the carrying to the carried is like the essential feature of the whole facade. So he was very happy to find that. And yeah, for those who want to go into that, why didn't he like the golden section? When you kind of start going into subdivisions, you end up with two identical parts, which is why Le Corbusier has so many squares inside of his compositions, which of course are lovely, but not for Van der Laan. He didn't like that. He really wanted to work with that, and with the 3 to 4 proportion, you can go down hierarchically endlessly, from the smallest building detail to the whole building and the side and the city. So that's what he wanted. This is one of the maybe more deeper explanations. This is another one, and saying that when you design with Van der Laan's system, you don't work with a decimal system, which often leads 10 divided into 2 times 5, and then the sameness, which Van der Laan didn't really like. You know, too much symmetry you compare. He always starts with 7, and then he subdivided in 3 and 4. So always you've got these 2 elements that you can compare, and then you've got this 1/4, which for him, the 1 to 7 was actually the element that connects small and big. There you are, that's the maximum. The minimum difference needed between 2 sizes so that we can differentiate them for him is this 1/4. So 3 to 4 is the other side of the spectrum. And this is how he designs. So we see a lot of squares going on, subdivisions in 3 to 4, 7 to 3. For example, here, if we go again to this entrance of Rosenberg Abbey, basically you see 3 to 4 everywhere in there. There's already here in the width proportions like that, so height to width is 3 to 4, but then he lowers this gate. By the way, this is 1 to 7 from the height of the wall. This is again 3 to 4, but then there's also the column, which is not in the middle of the entrance. It's slightly shifted to the right, so it's approximately 3 to 4. So everywhere there's this balance that he's looking by putting different elements in some kind of attention. So just quickly, not going into that too much, you'll have to buy the book if you really want to study it. But basically he has the keys of the piano, that's how I call it, and they go from 1 to 7, and each element grows with this plastic number 4/3. And you can do that 8 times. So when this is the thickness of the wall, then that's the smallest space. So for example, 1/2 meter, 3.5 meter, and then these would be sizes of columns, windows. Or if this is the size of a space in that building, then there's all the intermediate spaces. So actually it's one continuous element like that. And in Rosenberg Abbey, the walls are actually 0.5 meters. The cellas and the width of the galleries are 3.5. The building size is about 24.5. We bring around that also here, the front square. It's also 24.5, so it's 1 to 7 from the whole terrain. So the building is not in the middle, it's really to the side to give a sense of the scale of the whole thing. And then the whole terrain is about 171.5, kind of. Yeah, you can actually see that here. So all these kind of a smaller cells that you see here, there's a 3.5, there's a cloister, and then even in bigger spaces like this, he introduces a strange space, not in the middle, not on the side. He uses his column row to bring in this 3.5 meters. So you always enter through a door that leads first to a space that kind of embraces you, and then you enter the bigger spaces. So all even outside squares like that, they have galleries around to give it a scale with columns that you can count, that give you rhythm when you step through them. And I thought, okay, I've done this PhD, I've done 2 books, I've researched all the convents, I'm done with it now, I hope somebody else, will continue to work. But of course I knew about him being a teacher for more than 30 years. So he's been teaching more than 300 students between 1946 and 1973, about that, 30 years. And they're called, this was in 's-Hertogenbosch, and it was on church architecture, but he was developing there his ideas actually on this plastic number. And I thought, because also not all the architectures are essential, I think, or beautifully done, or anyway. I said, let some other researcher do that. But then, then I saw this, and one of them that actually was taught by Van der Laan, Tom Sanders, he showed me this small sketch of the house that he did together with architect Gerard Wijnen. A very small embryo thing in the 70s, which is actually, so beautiful. I didn't know it, and I was like, what is this? Nobody knows this. And already Gerard Wijnen, he died at that moment, but Tom Sanders was still alive, and he was talking about this so lively. So I kind of started to dive into it anyway. I was curious, and of course I knew that, he's been teaching. In the morning he would give a lecture, or another monk or somebody else, and then in the afternoon we would all sit together around the table to design together. So a lot of things happened in dialogue with him and his students, and I wanted to find out a bit more. I was triggered. Some of them are alive now, and I thought, if I don't do the book now, it's never ever going to happen. Of course I also knew about this house, which is the Jan de Jong house in the Netherlands. It's actually owned by a foundation now, Hendrik de Keizer, so it's a small museum. You can go there. I think in the future you can even go and stay there. It's a bit like the National Trust here. So we're very happy that it's in good hands. So I thought, okay, let's find some houses, and definitely this one, of course, was going to be part of the book. And I thought, let's find 7 houses. They will tell the story about this dialogue and about how these ideas in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s actually grew, and where did they come from. My research put me into dialogue with many of those architects, because I tend to analyze, not through my own interpretation. These are interviews, I make them draw, I film them, and then we make the drawings afterwards, from the very first detail to depending on how they tell the story. On the bottom right there's Tom Sanders, who unfortunately died after the book was made, so I'm very, very happy. Also Jan Petersen, he's not there anymore, but their story is there in the book, and so I'm very happy that I was able to put that down. And the only problem was, and that's why it took so long and why this book is so massive, I was going to stick with 7 houses, but of course that didn't work. And at 16 I really stopped. I said, okay, now I have it. This is definitely telling the whole story. So these are 16 houses in the south of the Netherlands. One of them actually is by Thomas van der Laan, but all the others are by his students. So I grouped them actually in 3 groups. One is this elemental house. It's that really essential work by Thomas van der Laan himself, and also Jan de Jong, for example. But I noticed that a lot of these houses were built in the 60s, even before the crypt. So before Van der Laan's, definitely austere, typical style, his students were already doing that. And especially their first houses. There's the ones that I really liked, the ones that they built for themselves with large families. And these, although they're pretty elementary as well, but they're for living, and they're built around tables, and they're to celebrate with large families. So I really like those houses. And then there's always this relationship with the house in the garden. While in the abbeys, this is really monumentalized with a cloister and a garden, and then some windows to the outside. Here it's much more interwoven with the gardens. So the house in the garden became a chapter in itself. So the 16 houses, they're mostly here in Breda, Eindhoven, Maastricht, and the direction of 's-Hertogenbosch. So I visited them together with the photographer Annabelle Stampaert. During years, we've been photographing them in different seasons to find actually the soul of every house. And for the book, I also invited a few other authors who went to see some of these houses with me. One of them, Elizabeth Hatz, who really wrote about intangible substances of architecture, which is about the wall. And yeah, she understood really well, with some beautiful photography as well, and also connected it with a beautiful drawing and drawing method. Nicola Panzini is a researcher from Bari in Italy, and he wrote a beautiful text on Van der Laan's travels to Italy and to all these ancient elements where he was learning from the Roman house. So he reconstructs the story of Van der Laan's travels, and he makes connections, which is another beautiful layer which I felt was needed to understand Van der Laan's houses. Yeah, and after 4 years, there it was. So I was very happy to work with Part Books, which already quite early on I was in contact with them. Bruno de Vos from Hoffer and Fuchs, he's actually a printer from Belgium who works with artists' books. He did the printing with me very intensely because of course the colors are important. And then Undercast, friends of mine in Antwerp, really also even went to this plastic number to do the whole layout. So for me this is also like that, a bit of a Gesamtkunstwerk with all of them, because they didn't come at the end of the book but also at the beginning. Especially the eye of Annabelle Stampaert was very, very important, because she helped me to see also through her lens. Because me as an architect, I tend to systematize, and she really focused on the use and the living. So yeah, it was a wonderful collaboration. And well, that brings me actually, I'll go quickly over the houses now, and then I guess you can have a glass and look at the book yourself. The first one, because I actually kind of lied already, I said one house by Van der Laan, but there's always already been another one. And I didn't actually really look at it a lot. But Rosenberg Abbey, it's got a small little house adjacent to it, which is really, it's a beautiful little embryo. And it's actually this one that I invited Annabelle to go and see for the first time, and she went at night to photograph this house when it woke up in the morning. And it's actually this studio, which was built for the priest, and it's kind of connected to the abbey with a wall, but kind of connected but not really. It's almost like a small child that is held by the hand, and yeah, you see also that the abbey is slightly folded a little bit, and here there's a fold as well, and then there's this little gate. Another nephew by Thomas van der Laan, who's also a Hans van der Laan. He helped me through a lot of analysis. He made the analysis of this house actually for me, so that's why I kind of made him a co-author in an honorary position. So he looked at this house with me and how it came about. Annabelle looked with me at this kind of a small essences and how it was actually built. You see there in the back this huge acacia tree, which was there only a few years earlier. So we're 78 now that this was built. So around the tree, and you see a structure here. It's a small square. It's about 12 by 12 meters. And actually the sisters, they didn't want a house. But Van der Laan, he really wanted something to finish the square and have some kind of a facade element there with a tree. So he sold it as being 3 garages, and he said, but you do need garages. And then they said yes. But then actually when you look at it in the front, you see actually that it's a house in disguise, because this one is actually a small portico and then moving on to a house like that. So like a small embryo, it's got lots of elements that all the other abbeys have as well. There's the central space that distributes with the zenithal light. And then there's these beautiful little plans that he made that Hans van der Laan has been analyzing together with me. So looking at this scheme, what he taught me that is very, very simple. He does one symmetrical trick anyway in the plan. You know, the 3 garages, the one in disguise here, but then for the house, to get the right rhythm in, there's like the kitchen and the bathroom, the wet cells, the central space in the small bedroom, and then the living area, which you want to have bigger, So what he did is he just, made this rhythm in 3 to 4 growing elements like that. So it's a tripartite, on the bottom equal, and on the bottom they just slide a little bit further, and that's how he designs. I put Hans van der Waals sketch in there. He's not happy with that, but I really wanted it in there to show also to the readers how he's struggling to understand these systems and how we were into dialogue with that. And he really went far into detail. Another thing that I found just by looking at these houses, which of course is in all of the abbeys as well, I didn't realize it. It's like a rule is that columns, they tend to be 2 to 7, always, 2 to 7, so 1 and 1. And so there's these rhythms in the small elements that come back. Here you see that's not the final photograph that went into the book actually. But you see that the little house, the tree arrives in the skies. But what happens way before that, we're talking actually 1968, 1967, there's other architects like Jan Petersen, and completely unknown actually, who built their little houses like this right at the moment that Van der Laan is building his crypt. So again you see all these kind of embryo elements going on in there, where you have quite a closed bottom facade, then you have this frieze at the top, which has a rhythm that you can count clearly, and then the door is of course not in the middle but slided to the side, mostly 2 to 7 or 2 to 5. Measures are always taken in the middle of elements, but again it's about the layering when you go from outside to inside, which already happens with this little wall. So you don't move into the house like that, you do it diagonally, and then there's the trees, and then there's a facade, and then there's a door. So when you move like that diagonally, he explained to me that on the inside he was actually doing the other way around, and actually the inside is one big space built around the table. So I named this one a house around the table, because all of his children, they were playing musical instruments, and their friends would come over and they would all sit together there to sing together and to party together, and that's what this house was made for actually. Central element there, so that's what's dividing this. A few columns and then this there. So he actually started to make these drawings. I met Jan Petersen, he was already really old. He was already in an elderly home and he was deaf, he couldn't hear anymore. So they set us together at this big table and he just started talking and talking. He was forgetting lots of things, but when he was talking about his designs, he kept on going. So I'm very happy that I could record all this, and I had to shout in his ear if he could draw, And then he said, draw, and he just took a pencil and he started to draw Mondriaan's Boogie Woogie. It's like, so I have this recording of that, which I didn't do anything with yet. But he said, no, I want to draw your house. Why? He said. And then he started to explain these kind of drawings. And the explanation is so clear, it's beautiful. He says, you start very simple. I use for this one a 6x7. It's always nice to not start from a square, but to take this 1/7 off. And then we have just this column row, which I love to take 1/5 off. We give this little slit here, and then a 2/4 and a 1/3. That's always the one that we used, this sequence. We always use that one, he explained. And when you then put another wall in, just play around with the sequence so things start to slide. And there you go. And so really, he sketched it really fast. So these are reconstructions in the book. Whenever we found something that we could reconstruct, it's in the book, but it's always a different story. This is Jan Petersen's story, which I absolutely love. And then when you know how you entered from the street going like this in the house, you're actually doing the opposite. And the furniture are further regulatory factors. Another beautiful house is this one by Frans Ruys. Again, it's a very simple book. We're 1966 here. His first house, he built 3, but this was for him and his many children. It were actually 2 houses. One he sold to a friend so they could build together and it was cheaper. He built many elements himself as well. So you see again the same kind of elements. Rough materiality, some friezes upstairs of continuous elements, and then some more autonomous elements like a front door or a window at the bottom. What I loved about this house is what he did with it about 10 years after it was constructed. He built this kind of a gallery, which kind of extends it and connects it more to the garden. You see, now here was not his house anymore. There was a young family in there, woman pregnant, and then two young boys who loved to play, and it was their kitchen. So these in between spaces, they get the best occupancy, I always think. So basically what he did, I think you recognize by now actually the typology of the original house. Again, he always says, yeah, I start with, yeah, people enter a cellar. That's what he likes to do with 1 to 7. This was a garage, but after 10 years, he built this gallery, and this became a dining corner. So we opened it up here. And then there's a gallery with 2 sitting areas, one inside, one outside. And it makes that you get the morning light over there, and then the sun travels and you get the evening light over there. So light travels much better in, this is the outside sitting space. He used a lot of materials that he found. So it's an S-found transformational project avant la lettre, and he built many things also himself. Yeah, lots of things going on, lots of 3 to 4, 1 to 7, 2 to 7. But one of the houses where actually the materiality actually came from, it's really Jan de Jong's house. This one is, I called it a monumental house because it's almost like a small cloister. And Jan de Jong, he knew this, what is called colorist Wim van Hoof, who tended to repaint churches or even make them bare. We're actually talking in the 40s now and the 50s. Jan de Jong met him, loved the way that he was using concrete and natural stones and all the secondary elements to paint in these complementary colors. And it's Jan de Jong who started to work with Wim van Hoof. And they kind of actually initiated this architectonic language that then Van der Laan started to engage with as well. So you see here how there's all these inner and outer gardens going on. Upstairs you've got a beautiful gallery, and then you've got different gardens all around, functional gardens. You see the rhythm. This is upstairs. You've got the sleeping cellas for all the children, and then the parents are here at the back. There were no doors, only curtains, so the children were not really happy with that. They had to live like small monks, really. And there you see actually the atmosphere of the house. So pretty dark. We left one wall really, because there was quite a busy road, completely windowless, which is almost incomprehensible if we would do it now, but he really wanted it like that. So when you enter, you move towards the light, these effects that he has, that Van der Laan sought for his cloisters. It's inside of this house as well. And downstairs, this is a side gallery. You've got a really long living room. This is, I think, almost 20 meters long. And on the one side, you have this kitchen, and so the water elements. On the other side, you have the fire elements and the sitting area. And the middle is just empty. So you tend to walk a lot. So you see there to the sitting area, the fire element. Jan de Jong designed all of the elements and all the detailing himself. And of course there's a story also of Mrs. Jan de Jong who had to wear clothing that Van der Laan designed, which she wasn't happy with at the beginning. But at some point she started to embrace that and made her own variations on that in all kinds of silks. It was upstairs again. This is sleeping cellas to the right. This rhythm of columns again there. And then all of the furniture also designed by him. There's also his architectural office in there. So where Van der Laan found this concept of the furniture in the wood, which is always like a section and extruded, all of the students, they started to make their own variations on that and to make these own Byzantine art pieces of that. House van Lierop, that was actually Jan Peters's best friend, only one street away. Again, you notice the same motive. This one's got 3 floors and a wooden frieze on top. What's regulating here is a central stair that actually organizes the whole house like a closed one. Beautifully detailed. And what I found there is actually the story of the colors, because Piet van Lierop, he would invite every year Wim van Hoof, and then they would test the colors of the stair and they would slightly change it. The first couple of years after the house was built. And I was very happy to find the original color coding where Piet van Lierop circled the colors that he used. The last chapter, it's the gardens, the houses in the gardens. House Swaak, for example, so many of the gardens are pretty wild, and also there was this kind of an accomplice, a kindred spirit, Peter Buys, who designed all of the gardens around the cloisters and always collaborated as well with all the architects from the Bosse School. And he made, for example, this kind of urban development, which is a typical garden city, quite big houses, this one. And several of the houses are built by the Bosse School architects as well. Tom Sanders' own house is in there. But I loved these approaches of what a house could be like. So they actually start with a street like that, which again the facades, they're gently touching small walls and then retracting and coming back. And what's very central is a green area and some trees, and they're scarce, but you don't practically see them, they're not dominating. So this is something in between semi-public, open, layered areas. So this is Tom Sanders' house. So the first thing you see is this kind of a walled front garden, which has all these little elements like a water element and a bench. Of course, there's always a tree, quite central, and then there's covered patios. There's this one column where everything turns around. I really love this house because of the way that it sits and also the way that it kind of differentiates different kinds of gardens as well. Quite central here is the kitchen, which sits in one of those L-shaped corners. So yeah, you tend to see that the different architects, there are about 8 of them that I have the houses from, they really have their own kind of architectural detailing and their own kind of language. But Neil Wijnen, together with Tom Sanders, they were really good in this the kitchens, the bathrooms, all these smaller details. They're beautiful. Yeah. And there's this one corner actually in the house. So basically, you enter through there, living room, kitchen over there, architectural office in the back. But Elisabeth, she really loved this kind of a knot in the middle of the house where everything comes together and subtracts again, and with all these niches everywhere. It was wonderful to just walk through that one. Connection with the garden from the other side. One of them that I could not neglect is the one that Neil Wijnen actually built for the landscape architect Peter Buys himself. Unfortunately, it was sold the year before I started on the book, and a new owner dismantled it completely. And we could not even get in, not that I really wanted to get in. So there's always these situations where I use photography from before, because I really wanted to be as close to the original as possible. And beautiful here is that you've got this apple tree that was there before, and the way you enter the house, you approach it like that. You kind of first go to the tree, and then you go up here, and then again. So it's this kind of a movement where you have a lot of different orientations going on. You see how it sits there, so it's actually 2 blocks there, and always here in the armpits, you could say. There's things happening like small pergolas. And then here's the office. I found again these beautiful original sketches and drawings. All of them are like in private archives. And also the way this house then connects to the garden, which again it's like always in different phases. You've got the column, the wall is a bit behind, a lower wall is behind, and then the stair goes down again. So a place is always made in different steps and phases. Here you look at that covered area from the other side. So a lot of green going on, which is abundantly there. And then that's the son, the father is called Gerard. I think I've been saying Neil. It's Gerard, of course. Neil is the son, and he made these analyses to go in the book to explain how it was done. Another beautiful one of the first one I saw, because it sits really like a Buddha. But once that I thought about that title, I couldn't find any other anymore. It's beautiful, and the way it sits within its garden and connects with this panoptical kind of office space in the corner. This is again one of Neil Gerard Wijn's houses, who made this beautiful little series of drawings. The entrance area, again a kind of a cellar space which kind of connects to that stair, and he also designed all of the furniture inside. We're 1977 now. And then how the kind of garden elements grow from that. A small thing that I kind of lead you into already a little bit is that I said, no, this is going to be the last book, but actually it's not true because I'm already working on the next one. And some new drawings are in there, also where I compare, for example, the crypt with Hatz Jan de Jong. It's like a manual, very basic, almost dry, just talking about architecture, hardcore, only the things that I really love, where I really try to understand in more detail, because of everything I learned through that houses, how like this is a musical score and how the things slide and how that actually works. Downstairs in the Jan de Jong house, upstairs in the Jan de Jong house, and also in the crypt, how there's these underlying patterns that move and shift. So that's coming out, that's going to be a thin book, which will be coming out probably at the beginning of next year with NAI publishers, also in English and Dutch. So after all of the work that I've done, I felt maybe the world is ready for a book just like that, you know, very dryly. And but the one that came before and that I learned so much from is the study of the houses, which became, because of the 16, almost like a big brick of 2.5 kilos and 4 years of work. So that's the one that's here for you tonight. Thank you.
Everything you've said often seems to stem from this, apart from most of the plastic series and the number, but the sense of a person as a presence in space, and you played that beautifully when you moved around in front. I found that really interesting. It's not really a question, but it was just it was just this sense of nearness and the idea of seeing a human being not as a body, but as a presence, so less aware of our object nature and more aware of our nearness. You know, there's loads and loads of great people here to ask you questions, so I'm going to throw the floor open.
Karen, thank you. I see all this. These raw textures, these sort of syncopated rhythms, these robust symphols and shells and sort of rich gardens, and they feel very familiar. And they feel particularly familiar from José van Hay's house in Buckinghamshire against. Is that a coincidence or what's going on there? Why does her house speak to me so much of this work?
Marie-José, she really knows the work of Van der Laan really well. She's been visiting and studying it as well. She doesn't like the comparison too much. Because, yeah, a lot of people ask her for that, and I think back in the 80s and the 90s, I think it was not cool to refer to Van der Laan. He was, especially in the south of the Netherlands, even when he started working, we're talking 40s, 50s, 60s here, there was this Protestant current going, functional architecture in the Netherlands, functionalism, which tends to be very close to modernism, these kind of things. And then you had this very strange monk with all his disciples. They were very dogmatic as well, not easy to talk to. In a sense, they were a bit strange. And then they built these strange houses with very thick walls and lots of columns without any light inside. And so, and it took a long time. I think the Bonafante exhibition, which he definitely saw, was the first one where this opened up, and suddenly, Van der Laan showed how he reinvented things for himself, actually already in the 50s and the 60s, but it's only in the 80s, which is Bonafante exhibition that came out. But still there was this aura around him of this kind of a mystique kind of thing, strangeness. Richard Padovan changed that a lot with his beautiful book Modern Primitive. But still he was a kind of a strange monk. So it was not always very cool to be compared to him. Or, you know, she prefers probably Levens, I guess. But still, I think things are turning around now because of how the work is being published by me, but by several others as well, that actually show the progression of this work. And maybe I should go back to her and ask what she feels about the comparison now.
There's also the more José does, actually, I think she just brings another layer of richness and softness to it, particularly in her own house.
Yeah.
I suppose it's maybe the raw brick and everything, and just absolute sort of simplicity of some detailing that makes that intense and real, whereas in a way the work for Lance maybe has a sort of finer and cleaner kind of quality.
Last time I heard her explain it, she was like, yeah, but we've got the same sources. Because she's looking at Sister Jensen architecture, and she says, I don't stop at Van der Laan, I go way further back, and so does he, and don't compare me all the time to this guy. But it's quite obvious, isn't it? The same sensibilities. Yeah, it's also, when I talk about this architecture, I like to talk about the sensibilities of it, and the rhythms of it, and how the light travels, and not just about this dogmatic proportional system, because from the moment it starts to become dogmatic, it's dead, and this is not the way to work with that. And she, of course, knows that really well. She's very virtuously designed the rhythm, very much.
And maybe that touching point is just the one project. Actually, even the house around the corner in Plumstow isn't.
Her house is very strong, eh?
Yeah.
It's also like a small cloister, and it sits around its garden, and so.
There's kind of a real contrast between this very standardised sort of monk cells and then these very personalised housing. Is there nothing kind of in between? It sort of feels like there's a kind of a mass housing that feels like a more obvious connection?
Well, I think if you look at the 16 houses, each of them have got their own connection with the person who lives in that. And even when the owner changes, sometimes they change it. I invited to look at the last house, which was for a doctor, Dr. Schure, and his wife is really into Rubens and the Baroque aesthetics. And she did the house interior decoration. And it's fine, it works. With all these dramatic lights and the dark light conditions. So yeah, it kind of works. That's what I really wanted to show in this book as well, that it's a house to live with. So it's definitely there. It's quite present because of its austerity, materiality, and also this darkness actually, in the dark colors. It's very much there. But you can connect to it in different ways. And all of the owners, they do that differently. And it's wonderful to see that across those 16 houses and how each one of them. I have to say, for example, one of the houses now is lived by two collectors, art collectors, who love to collect very bright chairs and I'm not gonna say which house it is, but I couldn't photograph it. I couldn't photograph it like that. So we took the photography with the furniture of the original owner. Yeah. So sometimes it matches. For them, it matched wonderfully. They were very happy in there. Sometimes, yeah, it fights a little bit. It depends on taste as well, I guess.
I mean, I guess I was kind of asking, are there any projects by these architects that are kind of more mass housing, more kind of...
Oh yeah, lots and lots. The whole of the south of the Netherlands, they've built townhouses, hospitals, lots of housing as well. Very close to the garden city, you have some beautiful projects. It's just that from the 300 students, not all of them used it, you know, just as the keys of the piano to come to some own story, but they use it like almost in a superficial way, making the grey walls and then the columns, and then you use a 3 to 4 exactly, you know, you don't deviate from it, and so unfortunately also some horrible buildings in Rotterdam. Really, absolutely. That's why first I thought I'm not going into that. You know, it's like I'll stay closer to Van der Laan. Yeah, so there's a few really good designers as well, and some beautiful bigger housing projects too. Yeah, definitely. I think everybody can play with the keys of the piano, and then you don't need these grey walls and these austere materials. You can go either way.
I was fascinated, you talked about the acolytes and those who studied with Van der Laan. Did I see the name Nico Van der Laan on one of the drawings? Yes. Who is that?
Nico Van der Laan was his brother.
Right.
So Van der Laan grew up in a family of 7 children. His father was an architect, Jan van der Laan, who had a huge office. And then 2 of his sisters became nuns. And then his older brother, Jan van der Laan, took over the office of the father. And then his younger brother, Nico van der Laan, he graduated a couple of years after he stopped studying. So Van der Laan, he studied only for 3 years. He wasn't a qualified architect, actually. He entered the convent. But then Nico started his own practice. He was very young. And they were like the right hand and the left hand on one belly, always. So it's actually his 2 brothers, Jan, who was a bit older, and Nico, who was more experimental, started his own office, that really motivated him to talk about his ideas. First in small study groups of 10 to 12 people, students. Somebody was taking notes. Van der Laan took the notes, and this is how he started to pin down his ideas. And it became all of his lessons. So Nico was very, very important to him. Not only in the development of his ideas, they were teaching together, and whatever project Van der Laan built, Nico was there also to do the execution.
Wow.
because Van der Laan, of course, he was a monk, being inside of an abbey and dealing with everything a monk deals with. It was quite a closed abbey, actually. First he fostered, then in Vals. The last 30 years of his life he was in Vals, this Benedictus way, which is very close to Solem, still very authentically Latin, everything. So he was very much into that. And then his brother was outside and could deal with clients, could deal with construction, local architects. So Nico van der Laan was very, very important. Absolutely.
Where is the legacy now, and where do you think it will go?
I hope it will travel more and more. There's still this beautiful archive with thousands of drawings, which is still in the Abbey St. Benedictus, Berg in Vals. I'm sure at some point it will travel somewhere. Thankfully, it's been digitalized already for quite some parts. Some things are already on certain websites. So researchers, they can actually connect to the archives. The buildings are there to study. There's so many more things to study. Van der Laan started actually with clothing, design of clothing and objects. There's hundreds of drawings of his clothing, which are absolutely beautiful. So I'm still waiting for somebody to, I hope that somebody catches that and does something with that. But then I think, his legacy, thankfully, we're not anymore to this typical modernist, functionalist, whatever, or star architecture kind of, whatever took the Netherlands a little bit away from what architecture could be. And there's a lot of openness now for other qualities, which are more architectural, which are more crafts-based, which have to do with Marie-José Vallée or with Mike Peterson or Palazma, who writes about that. So there's a lot of openness for that. And actually, several of you who are here today, or a lot of London architects that I met because they really wanted to see Rosenberg Abbey, and I guided them around. So also here in London there's a big tribe that really likes his work, and I think that beyond the liking there's a lot of layers that you can use educationally. I noticed as well that educationally a lot of students use the website, they find my book online. Actually also in 2 months I'm traveling to China because it's being translated in Chinese. So Van der Laan in China is very hot for the moment. So it's traveling, these ideas, and I'm just happy to help in looking at that from a different perspective, and I only hope that more people will join and do that.
Well done, Nico, for running with the builders, eh? You had to run the contract.
He had to run the contract.
And he didn't have to, did Hans van der Laan ever have to worry about money and financing, or was Nico there to make sure that the contract and the cost made connected, because they are built, so we had to engage with the pragmatics of construction.
Absolutely. Well, there's only 4 convents built, and actually then this one house now. And there's reasons for that. There's a lot of unbuilt projects as well. Again, because they couldn't find funding, or people found them too austere. And actually, Van der Laan during his life he struggled a lot. Especially, he really wanted to be heard. He wanted to communicate his ideas. He wanted to build, but it was very difficult for him to find clients. Very, very difficult. Yeah. And Nico, he built a lot of projects himself. Which was more public, like hospitals, and he had a lot of work actually outside of Van der Laan's own circle actually. But Van der Laan, he really wanted to get his ideas out there, and I found traces of him sending the book to different architects and theoreticians, and I found other notes where they kind of dismissed this kind of very strange dogmatic plastic number, and it was difficult for him. It's because of Richard Padovan actually and a few others that things started to turn around. But it was a struggle for him, and money of course as well. Then they made models, and then they raised money. Yes, he was definitely part of that.
Thank you.
That worry.
nice talk, very nice work. Why 7? The number 7. I know it's a very basic question, but I wonder if it has to do. What is the relationship with his life as a monk? And are there other reasons why 7 is an important number in terms of him being a monk and the patterns?
Not symbolically, not liturgically. No. You can find a lot of 7s. He worked with 8 as a shape as well, octagonal, which has something to do with 7 days and the 8 days that things began again. So if he would design a Baptist font, it would have 8 sides. So there's definitely liturgical connections like that. But the 7, I think, it has to do with scale. First, he worked with 1 to 6 actually, or actually only 5 measures. But it was a little bit too dense. I think it's in the progression of the dozens of years that he developed. I think the 1 to 7 came around in the 40s and 50s. I think it's empirically decided, these things, really, as a designing architect. Also, first looking at ornamentation and how that could have expression in space. And then, moving on from that, you see always small changes in decisions, and once the decision is made and it works, and it serves as a tool, he holds on to that and he goes on. Yeah, the 1 to 7, I think, because I found this one text in the 40s where he talks about this human cell, which is your own body length projected outward and these kind of things. I'm very happy I found that text because it introduces a very important underlying decisions that he must have made because of this text. Because I remember Hans van der Laan, the nephew, the son of Nicola actually that is, who looked at all these things with me. He's always like, Carrie, why are you putting so much attention to this nearness and this body and outward, and it's not thought of like that. And then, he was very angry with this new book that I was making, because first there's the drawing, the drawing with the monk thing, and I really like that. And then the circle around it, and but I say no, it's in a text from the 40s, and it's not because he doesn't explain it afterwards anymore. These are ideas, he decides on that, and then he moves on. And it's a lot of strengths. It's empirically decided, these decisions. He sees things in buildings, he tests things out, lots of models, lots of drawings, lots of drawings with small numbers on the side, hundreds of drawings like that. So the 1 to 7, it's about what he thinks is balanced. I'm sure of that. Positive.
And the words rhythm, score, that link to music, are these from your own interpretation, or are these terms that
he uses those terms in specific texts, but there's no evidence or text of van der Laan explaining his architecture. None. If you read Architectonic Space, he's explaining very typological spaces. He talks about the column in the wall and the cella and the gallery and these kind of elements, very philosophically. And then suddenly there's this proportional system that solves everything, and you're kind of like, so what do I do with that? Basically it's because I started to be in dialogue first with Rick van der Laan, who is the other son of Nico. Nico had 2 sons, Rick van der Laan and Hans van der Laan. And Rick van der Laan was the right hand in building the Tomelilla convent. And he's actually the one who explained to me already 3 years in my PhD, just mimicking kind of what van der Laan was saying, half mystically, And then he just made a drawing, and I was like, just like that. I don't remember the beginning of your question now.
no, it's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you a question. So, I don't know the chronology of the
composition and the composition of the project seems to be something that I feel I'm trying to individuals experience, but in the context of the monastery, it's inherently communal. It would be simplistic to say a house is not communal. But did he write? Did he explain any point of difference between a house and a bigger building in that sense as a communal set of spaces like a place?
Definitely he did. And he, from time to time, he writes about the house, and his idea of the concept of the house changes as well. Or he tries to find different explanations to that. I think the first text you find in the 50s, he writes beautiful text and he calls it habitus, which is also to do with clothing. And he likes to write through analogies, and he says that people need clothing because we don't have hooves like animals and this kind of thing. So when then he kind of grows into a house, and that's why we need a house. So he writes about it in a very essentialistic way and very fundamental. So first his house, also for him a church, is an eminent house, a place where you gather. Church is not a church because it's consecrated, or because there's a cross in there, or because it's just a place that's eminently there for gathering. And this for him was actually the first house. And then, he starts to design a few houses, but it's mainly really his students who started to take his ideas and translate that into day-to-day elements, which I think is wonderful. I think it really influenced him a lot as well.
It's unusual for it to happen that way around. The start of the house.
Yeah. What I find beautiful is that at some point his cloisters in the beginning, or like Rosenberg Abbey, is actually one stretched aisles around this cloister. And I noticed in Richard Padovan's book, Richard talks extensively about Valls, which is the first one, Then there's these two convents in Belgium, only a few pages. And then there's the last one, which is Tomelilla in the 90s. That's the one, because apparently Van der Laan was very critical about the Rosenberg monastery. All the time his students and his surroundings were pressuring him to talk about urbanism. Well, actually he's always reflecting on the urban through the small scale, in relation one to the other. So urban theory in Van der Laan's writings, it's very theoretical. And in the 60s and the 70s, he starts to, at the end of the 70s, he starts to develop these new models, thematismos, which looks at volumes being put together. And then he explains, well, he wasn't happy with Rosenberg Abbey because you don't feel the scale of the house in there, because it's like one big thing, and one glues into the other, and he's pretty critical about that. When you look at the Tomelilla convent, all of the wings are pronounced like separate volumes around, and they're nesting around a garden more like that, and then you've got these in-between spaces in wood connecting the different wings. And that was a thing, that was a theory, the school example, and Richard Padovan really follows that. I don't follow that. He was very critical about Rosenberg Abbey as well, because he played a lot with small perspectives and small twisted angles, mathematical figures, which are geometric anyway still. So he was playing a lot there, and for me that's why it's his most beautiful project actually. But the scale of the house there is lost. It's within the interior that you feel almost in a Semprian kind of way how the spaces embrace you, and then how dynamic it is. Much more dynamic than the Tomelilla, which is monumental, which is different volumes, but one besides the other, much more. Because he was looking for that scale of urbanity which connects houses. So also there, to answer your question, his idea of the house developed alongside the years he's been building, and also in dialogue with what he was asked what he thought.
Those very early models, of course, illustrate beautifully that shift between building and actually sitting. The distribution of the cells is a kind of proto.
Absolutely. Yeah. But those models were done only end of the 60s, 70s, and they were made actually for the exhibition in the Bonafante Museum. That's when his work came out. So these really abstract models, they were almost at the end of his theory. But that was his answer. He says, if you want urbanity, this is what for me is urbanity. So yeah, houses kind of, yeah.
Okay, so I'll put it on really.
I'm curious to ask if you've ever tried playing Vanderland piano. Rather than observing it, ever tried using it?
Yes, lots and lots. I love it. Yeah. Actually, even now, I'm doing a project in Leuven. It's a competition. I want to do the interior of it's a huge convent, Albertine convent, turned into a museum. And we're designing 2 entrance spaces there. And we have to do also a study in wayfinding. I don't know if that's a thing here, but suddenly you've got wayfinding specialists, and all the clients in Belgium, they want specialists in wayfinding, and they have lots of money for that. So I was like, okay, we're going to be the specialist in the wayfinding, and I really used on the last series of the different scales, from the large one to the smaller one in the object, and how they're all working together, and how intuitively this is how you navigate your space. So this is definitely from the last piano. And they loved my holistic approach. But it really works actually. Because I hate the way wayfinding is sometimes, it's all about arrows, and it's totally not about the space and how you experience it and how you see it and how you navigate through it. And Van der Laan really helps. It's beautiful, yeah. It makes it understandable also to explain it to a client how spaces can work. It's a beautiful framework. But I love to play with the proportions as well. But yeah, when I'm now, like in Hasselt for example, they've got all these triangular squares and what's the name?
Diamonds.
Diamonds, they've got all these diamonds, and of course there's Francesca Torzo who's doing all these diamond shapes. I'm not going from the Laan in there. I'm going with triangular, Borromini kind of, and also the Norbertinian. It's very Baroque, so I'm going Borromini. I love to have this kind of underlying patterns always, that you kind of, we were talking about it before. By using that, you kind of lose yourself a little bit as an author, and you let the space in the drawing speak, and then the section becomes a plan. And I learned this from Christian Kickens as well, which I'm sure you learn as well in your own work. And also Van der Laan helps me a lot there on how to design like that. I love his piano. But I also like Borromini's piano.
Such a powerful body of work for its simplicity, isn't it? And making so evident the idea of composition, and making so evident the idea of construction as a form, as drawing. Not construction as in tectonics, but construction of all those electrical, numeric patterns, and then the consequences, material consequences, shadow, light, and relationship. Beautiful explained. Thank you very much. Please stay for a drink. Please buy the book.
Thank you.